We are live.
Hey everybody, welcome to podcast number 8. This is Embodiment of Soul Care. And last week was a heavy week with the heart and talking about, the whole entire space of the heart and how it extends out and all the things that we need to be conscious of and aware of with the heart space. This week is going to be really cool. We're going to talk about, I have to read the title because Casey came up with the title and it's quite long and I love it. So I'm not going to mess it up. So it's stop trying to wake other people up and focus on your own expansion of consciousness. Oh boy. I think all of us, I know that I personally have experienced this in the last couple weeks. The whole contrast, the push and pull, how someone else is feeling, how I'm feeling, and how we're just not getting along because of how they're feeling and how I'm feeling, and how dare them feel bad because I want to feel good type mentality on both sides. And I also had a lot of clients this week call me with kind of the same push and pull, the contrasting thoughts in their relationships, the contrasting thoughts in their own head. And yeah, I think that this is a time to, and Casey is going to touch on this, especially in our world as a whole, where we're being polarized, like one group of people on one side and one group of people on the other, and we're kind of returning back to that which we thought we were away from for a while. And now it's all coming back in kind of a spiraling effect and affecting a lot of people actually, and their conscious awareness as well as their emotional state. So I'm going to toss this to Casey, and Casey is going to start off with, a little bit of rendition. I think of a little bit of what happened with you this week, and we'll go from there. And hang on, because this is a ride. This is something we all need to be really conscious of and pay close attention to and kind of figure out. And we're going to try to help you guys as well as ourselves, which is important. Casey and I talked about that we all know that we're all in this together. Navigate through and kind of figure out easier ways to get out of this contrast thinking. So awesome. Go for it, Casey.
Thank you, my dear. So the one thing I first wanted to bring up, you talked about this term overjoy last week because we were talking about the heart and the heart field, and you were saying, one of the negative emotions of the heart field is overjoy and how that can be confusing for people. And having that term made such a difference for me this week, because what's really interesting is I have a lot of overjoy, and I had identified it kind of in the last year, but I had like a lot of nebulous terms for it. It was like this nebulous thing that kind of controlled me, but I couldn't always get a handle on it. But I was starting to realize just how much of an impact it really had on my life in negative ways. And, we were talking a lot in these podcasts about how, I had a lot going for me before Corona hit. And then it was really hard for me because I kind of felt like I hit a brick wall. And a lot of that, though, what I'm realizing, the positive aspect of this quarantine and this quiet time is that I was able to pull back from the overjoy. Like I had been more in a state of overjoy than I would want to admit, and it's allowed me to pull back more to my balance point. So I thought that was so cool. And then this week I was able to have something, it was almost like a trigger word for me. And when I noticed myself going to that state of overjoy, which for me, I can tell it's almost like I've overtaxed my nervous system. I can feel it running through me. I'm becoming much more conscious of when I'm in overjoy, but having that term allowed me to switch it, like flip a switch this week. And I'd be like, oh, I'm in overjoy, and I could breathe and I could literally calm down in a heartbeat, in a millisecond. I've never quite been able to do it that quickly. So just having that term made such a difference. Anyways, I just wanted to share that with you because I really do think it was really powerful for me. And like you said, sometimes that sense of it, or being able to identify it like that, can be really powerful for people. So I thought that was so cool that made such a difference for me from our conversation last week. And then here was the other funny thing about this week. So I re-listened to our podcast, and what I realized was that I didn't really say a lot of the cool things about the heart field. Like I went back and I was like, oh, I kind of skipped over like a lot of what makes it really cool and what makes me so excited about it. Things I wanted to share. So this week I got a little more official. I'm just going to take a couple minutes. I found a couple of really cool articles, which I will post in the notes at the bottom of this podcast, that talks about the heart field, because it's an electromagnetic field. I forgot to mention that. It's like, it is it's scientifically proven. The heart field is actually scientifically proven, which is so cool, right? Like, it's spiritual and it's scientific. It kind of blends the two worlds. I just think that's so amazing. So the title of the first article was 7 Scientific Reasons You Should Listen to Your Heart and Not Your Brain. Because we talked a lot about, the brain field, heart field. And so I wanted to share a couple of cool facts with everyone that I just think brings us really present to that power of the heart field. So number 1, researchers refer to the heart as the little brain because there's so many sensory neurons relaying information from the heart to the brain. I mean, it has its own neurons. It is a little brain. So that's so cool. The heart communicates to the brain and the body in 4 ways. The nervous system, the heart produces its own hormones. It communicates via blood pressure waves, and then the energetic information from the strong electric and electromagnetic fields. So it's literally communicating with the whole body. It is, that kind of brain. Number 3, there is more information sent from the heart to the brain on a daily basis than vice versa. So there's more info going this way than this way. Very cool. And then listen to these stats. The heart emits more electrical activity than the brain. It emits an electrical field 60 times greater in amplitude than the activity in the brain, and an electromagnetic field 5,000 times stronger than that of the brain. And that's what they're measuring. I mean, how cool is that? So the electromagnetic field of the heart can be measured anywhere on the body using an EKG, but also for several feet outside the body. We talk about having our bubble, and we talked a lot about, the power of expanding your sphere in your heart field. But, even scientifically, it literally goes out a few feet from your body, in a radius. And then this was cool. Activity in one person's heart can be measured in the brain waves of another person. So, it's scientific that your heart field is affecting other heart fields. Like, I just thought that was so cool.
Well, I just to see the energetics.
Right. Yeah, like healing touch and all those things.
Energy, yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of, proof for like, why does some energy healing work?
Right, exactly.
And the electrical activity of the heart and brain can be guided into synchronous electrical rhythm that can be easily measured by focusing on positive and loving emotions emanating from the heart. And we had talked about coherence, at the end of last week's podcast. So I thought that was so cool. Like, there's scientific evidence, that coherence does happen from the heart waves. So I just thought that was really neat. And then the other cool thing, if you think about, because one of my meditations dealt with the core of the earth being the heart chakra of the earth, and then our heart chakra, is kind of the core of our heart field, right? You can kind of think of it that way, little sphere, big sphere. And it was talking about, we believe the earth's magnetic field connects all living systems that are within that field, plant, animal, everything. And then it said this really cool thing. We're finding that our personal magnetic field works with the Earth's magnetic field. And when we tune ourselves correctly, we can receive the information it contains. So it was talking about how we're all part of this one big brain. That, even the electromagnetic field around the Earth, which we know, there is a magnetic core. The Earth does have an electromagnetic field. So it's almost very similar. It's like macro, micro. We are like the micro version, of macro, like the Earth, and like so it just proves like all of our electromagnetic fields are communicating with each other, and mostly from the heart. So I just wanted to throw in those couple things because it's just endlessly fascinating to me. But I couldn't believe that I left all that out last week. So thanks for letting me share that.
Conversation is on horn,
Totally. And you were going to mention a couple comments. We were talking this week about how the heart, the element is fire in Chinese medicine. Do you want to talk about that just briefly? Because we had a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I can just touch on that just real quick. So in Chinese medicine, there's the earth. So you have wood, you have fire, you have earth, you have metal, you have water. And every organ system sits in one of those elements. And fire, the element of fire, just so happens to house both the heart, the pericardium, which is the protector of the heart, and the small intestine. So when you start to have senses of overjoy or other emotions that are evading the heart space, you tend to build a bigger and bigger fire. And then the only thing to put the fire out is the kidney energy, the kidney and the bladder energy, which is the water. And so that just splashes it out. But if you don't have enough yin going on in the system, then we end up having, cardiac arrest or anything else, because the heart fire just gets so big that it takes over the entire body. So no, it's interesting how the heart is connected in so many ways to everything. Like you just said, it's a macro micro system, but it also is an element of the earth. So that's where it sits, is in the fire element.
Huh.
So yeah, Chinese medicine's interesting, and Casey and I kind of discussed it a little bit. We'll have to do a whole, podcast just on the elements of the earth, the cycle of how it all feeds into each other, the mother-son relationships, the counteractive relationships, the flow relationship. And it just kind of explains a lot about your body and why your body does the things that it does to overcome dis-ease within the body. So we'll have to touch on that a whole nother podcast, because that will take an entire podcast, maybe 2 or 3.
Oh, seriously.
Yeah.
I just thought it was so cool how it kind of connected, because like I said, I can tell when I'm in Overjoy, and it's like an overheating, like that too much fire. It's literally too much fire in my body. And that was a cool connection when you made that. I was like, oh, that's exactly what it feels like. It's like fire in my nervous system. And, the breathing or a mantra or just literally slowing down, walking slower, is the water element in that moment that helps me, kind of cool the fire. So I just thought that was a neat connection.
Absolutely. All cool. I mean, everything ties into each other, and that's the beauty of the body of the earth, of spirituality. It all encompasses itself in, and it all intertwines.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And here's something cool that this leads really nicely into our topic for today. One of those articles about the heart said, here was a direct quote from that heart math, that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
Technology isn't going to shift the problems we have in society and the planet. It's going to take a shift of consciousness for that to happen. So, and that's directly what we're speaking to tonight. It's not going to be out there where most of the solutions are. It's going to come from here, come from our own level of consciousness and how much we're able to pay attention to ourselves and then be really conscious of what we're putting out. So I just loved that quote. And again, that'll be in the article that I post, but just was like a perfect lead in, because I feel like, this week essentially is like peeling another layer of the onion. Last week we focused a lot on more the personal aspect of this. Are you in ego and judgment, or are you expanding your bubble? Are you contracting or expanding? And we were talking more about your personal sphere of consciousness and your heart field and how you're putting that out there. And then this week we're going to focus a little bit more on the macro view, on society as a whole, and how in all of us with our different heart fields and different, abilities to be expansive and to not be expansive, how is that impacting us as a society as a whole? And what does that look like, which I think is so much what we're going to address tonight. So, and that relates to all sides. Last week we kind of, spoke more between the two sides, but that doesn't, we were just addressing it from, I don't know, now I'm tripping on myself. Okay, anyways, let's move on. What do you want to say? I just totally tripped over my own tongue. What I wanted to say was, it's not like political, like this isn't based on parties or two sides or whatever, because it's such a mess. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, everything's just such a mess right now. We weren't speaking to one side or the other. We were speaking to everybody, including ourselves.
Right. And I think that, we can speak of that on that huge level, of the entire world. And we can also speak on a personal level within ourselves and within our relationships with just family and friends and people that are around us every day, our children, whoever. And I don't know, do you want to start with talking about the entire world, that kind of political perspective, or just, overall, or do you want me to start with just the individual side of things?
Well, what kind of came up, so here's what really came up for me. I spoke a lot about the darkness, right? I was declaring, like, let's anchor our light on this planet. Let's really declare who we are as light workers and anchor our light, versus feeding the darkness. And after I listened to it, I'm like, wow, it's such a good question, right? Like, what is that darkness? When I say that, what am I even talking about? And I think so much of it that it comes down to, for me, when I talk about society as a whole and what is going on from a more global perspective, it's like, what is making us so intolerant? And that was the word that came to me. It's like, there's just such a level of intolerance out there for other people's views, and for people to, be able to think what they think and still be, intelligent, functioning human beings, that you respect them and they respect you. What has happened that we're so disrespectful and we're so intolerant? And that was kind of where I left off, at the end of last week's podcast, when I, said something pretty personal to my heart. And I was sharing with you this week, Kelly, said something really came up for me because I was sharing, I do have a lot of loved ones and friends that right now, I mean, I'm speaking more politically because that just happens to be the divide that I think a lot of us are feeling and a lot of us are present to, regardless of which side you're on. And certainly there's some crisscross in between, it's not like a clean divide line, but at times, it does occur that way. And I've had a really hard time in the last 4 years trying to navigate being almost on like that balance beam in between the two. It's like if you have people that you love and respect on both sides and you know what they say about each other, and so much of the time you hear disrespect coming from both sides, it can be really hard, to stay in that balance point. And because I'm so empathetic, and I really feel like I can put myself in other people's shoes, it's like, oh, I get where you're coming from. Oh, I get where you're coming from. And they both have really valid points. That sometimes it's kind of painful, to hear what they say about each other. And I really, it occurred for me, like, it's almost kind of like a civil war, and that's where part of my, why it's been so important for me to find that balance point so that I don't get pulled, but I can still hold a big field and hold a lot of compassion. That's a really fine balance, and it occurs as something like, let's say you have the Israelis and the Palestinians, right? When they're just two separate societies functioning separately, they can have plenty of judgment and hatred toward each other, not seeing the validity of the other person's point. But, there's those stories, right? Like when you get a couple of Israelis and a couple of Palestinians together in a room and it's a safe space and they can actually come together and speak to one another and see the humanness in the other person, really see them and really hear their story and go, wow, okay, my story is still valid, my opinions are still valid, but so is yours. And that's been the pain point, and so I was just really present to that this week and allowing myself and my heart field, because I think sometimes when I get, I don't want to get contracted by that. I still want to be able to expand inside of that and get even bigger, to hold even more of that, even though it can be hard sometimes to be on that, what occurs for me as a dividing line. And you and I were talking about, what is at the root of that intolerance? Why do we have that? And really it boils down to fear. You can see a lot of anger on the surface. You can see a lot of projection. You can see a lot of vehemence. But what is underlying that is fear. And right now, the fear of death is so real and in people's faces. It literally turned from, okay, the 2016 election and kind of just like politics. And I feel like the way that, people feel about the other side, like you're stripping away what's good about life. They're like, oh, but if we do it your way, you're going to strip away what makes life worthwhile, or what makes life good, or what makes humans good. Each side kind of feels the same way about the other, just like the Israelis and the Palestinians. Like, it seems like they can't coexist, because the way you want it to be is going to impinge on the way I want it to be. But then we're eroding the very basis of, free speech and all these rights that our beautiful country is built on, and that, we would love for other people to enjoy, and that we're glad when they do enjoy it. So, that's a lot what we were talking about. Now it's even more extreme though, because there's literally this fear of death with this virus going around, so now people have even more fear to latch onto so that they can be even more intolerant and more afraid and more contracted, and that's so much of where, that's just so much of where this energy is coming from right now, that as a society, that's what we're feeding. So when I was talking about the darkness or whatever, that's kind of the darkness that we're feeding. We're either going to expand and feed the light, or contract and feed the darkness. And, I guess the other piece of it being that I really saw, is like, I feel like everybody has some version of, utopia, that they think, oh, well, if life was just this way, then everything would be great, right? Which was kind of goes back to the know-it-all thing we talked about last week. It's like, it's just a bunch of know-it-alls walking around going, well, I know what utopia should look like. And if it looked that way, or if I was president, clearly things would just go wonderfully, forgetting what life is really like. Life is messy, no matter who you are, what you are, there's so many trade-offs. I finally remembered that quote I was trying to tell you the other day, and it was, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Right? Isn't that perfect? It's like, we all have some vision of, oh, and if policies were this way, and if society was this way, and people acted more this way, then it would, we would be in harmony and happiness and humans would live lovely together, forgetting half the time it's kind of 50-50, right? Let's say you enact a policy. There's going to be really good outcomes from that. And there's going to be unintended, not so good outcomes that you didn't even think of. Or, some of what you thought would go great, maybe doesn't. Some of what maybe shouldn't have gone great goes better than you thought or produces something you could have never thought of. So I think it goes back to that know-it-all thing that everyone has some vision they're fighting for. And like I said, they're planting their flag, that it should be this way. And anyone who doesn't agree with me is now standing in the way of a loving, harmonious planet. How dare you? So that as a society, we just have this level of anger and intolerance, just building, with this fear underlying it. And so I just kind of wanted to bring that up because I think we've all just gotten so sidetracked by that, and that's easy to do. But I just wanted to bring it into our awareness because it's something that I try and stay really aware of. And I'm trying to narrow that down. I have to just broaden it back out. I want to be in other people's shoes. I want to see their points of view. I can still hold true to my truths, but allow other people to have their truths. I just said a lot. How about you?
Well, that's
what you're thinking.
No, I think that last point you made, allowing people to have their thoughts is one of the biggest things here. Because this brings back up a topic that we've kind of addressed in other podcasts. And this is, instead of trying to tell somebody where they should be standing, allow them to be standing wherever it is they wish to be standing, and you be secure with where you're standing. Thank God that there is those that we do not agree with and those that do not see the same things that we see. Because if there weren't, then we wouldn't have the capability of launching out, like we talked about, these rockets of desire of how we really want things to be in our lives. Because if I didn't see the contrast, if none of us saw the contrast, we wouldn't have any idea what we wanted.
Right.
So it's, instead of sitting there and saying, oh, how dare you, like you were just saying, how dare you believe that way? And how dare you think that we should act? Did you see that moth just fly and attack my head? How dare you, behave that way and do those things that way? It's not making me feel good. Well, it's like, listen, if it weren't for them doing that, then you wouldn't know how you really wanted to feel or how you really wanted to be. And so it's important that everybody stays in their little corner of however they believe and they're truthful to themselves. And the biggest thing is, don't worry about what someone else is doing. If I sat there every day and I said to myself, oh my gosh, I just wish that he or she would behave this way so I could be happy. Well, why can't you just be happy and be content with where you are and not worry about where they're at? Because they're making them believe how you're believing in order to make you happy is insanity. And that goes for all the politics and all the religions and all the belief systems of the world. It'd be like me sitting down with somebody and having a spiritual conversation with them and saying, well, what the hell do you mean you don't believe in the way that I'm believing? Is that fair? No. They came to this planet to learn their lessons, to live their life how they wanted to live it, and to believe the things they believed in. And we have no right to sit there and try to manage it. If you sit there and try to manage it, your life's going to be absolutely miserable. And that's why a lot of people are miserable, because they are trying to micromanage everybody's system. Let it be. Let it go. Focus on managing your system. Be aware of your emotions and your mental state, and don't be trapped in them. You know how we talked about the whole attachment deal? You don't want to be attached to how you're feeling about something or how you're thinking about something, because then you have no ability to rise to a conscious level. You're always in that emotion. You're always swimming in that soup of crap that you're thinking about or that you're emotionally dragging yourself in and out of. Get out of all of it and start to embrace a higher vibration of yourself. And once you start doing that, and once you start rising out of those, conflicts and scenarios of disappointment, those conflicts and scenarios of disappointment will no longer exist around you. It's just absolutely impossible. And if they do, you will just brush right past them and say, well, isn't that an interesting perspective? On to this. And that's where we're all trying to get to. And the only way we get there is to have those contrasting thoughts, to have people that piss us off, that make us mad, that divide us, so that you can send your rocket of desire and you can start to behave better each and every day by being consciously aware of where you're standing in the soup with them. Okay, am I in the hot shit or am I out of it? Okay, where am I? And a lot of people always say, okay, well, when I have this emotion, how do I kind of, get through it? How do I battle it? Well, you have to figure out what your trigger point is. What is it that you're attached to? Are you really attached to this one belief and you can't let go of it? And if that's the case, okay, at least acknowledge it. And we've talked about this too. Acknowledge what it is that you're so attached to, that you're having such a hard time wrapping your head around, and then about, that problem, and then launch out a rocket of desire that makes you feel better about that. So I don't want to feel like that anymore. That's a rocket of desire. I don't want to have hatred and discontent with this person anymore, or this situation, or this president, or this governor, or this politician, or this teacher, or this lover of mine. That's power in itself, just knowing you no longer want that. Because, Casey, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but it feels a lot of times, just, through living life, through my own experiences, watching people and watching myself, we attach to those things. And those people, we just always are seeing them as that problem. And how much more powerful would it be to say, this is something I no longer want to see, instead of, oh, every time I see this person, I just feel like shit and I just don't want to be around them. How much more powerful would that be to say, I don't want to feel like that about that person anymore. I don't want to feel like that about this situation anymore. I'm going to remove it. I'm gonna start thinking more positively about it all, and that's my rocket of desire. I don't want to feel like that. You don't even have to specify what you want to feel like. You just don't want to feel like that, and the universe will answer that. They really will.
Yeah. And I actually have a cool exercise at the end that I read from that guy I follow, Matt Kahn, that addresses exactly what you just said. That people, it's like 5 steps that they could follow to do exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Because I started working with it in the last couple of days. It's really good.
Yeah. Is it 5 steps, like ask for what you want, that type of thing?
Well, why don't we just do it now?
Yeah. I mean, fit it right in. Yeah.
Yeah. So he says, as a way of anchoring high vibrational energy in climates of amplified social and emotional turmoil, simply ask yourself the following questions. So number 1, what adjective best describes the emotion felt in the presence of someone who bothers or triggers me? So kind of come up with, okay, God, it drains me. Oh, it's so draining, right? So number 2, what is the opposite positive emotion to that feeling? For me, it would be like, oh, I just feel expansive. I feel full and expansive and lighten up, something like that. Number 3, what can I do right now to be that positive emotion in action? Maybe it's running a quick flow meditation in myself. Maybe it's just, literally imagining my sphere around me so that even when I'm with that person, I'm still in my safe sphere, so just kind of a positive action to do. And then number 4, if unsure, can I take a moment and silently bless the person bothering me with more of that positive emotion throughout their life, even if after the fact and in retrospect? So they're saying, I mean, this a year later, this could be something that happened to you 30 years ago or 30 seconds ago. Can you expand your heart field so that you can just put that, I want that person to feel expansion, just like I want to feel expansion and lightness. So you put that out there almost as a blessing. I really like that sense where he says, just silently bless them that they may feel that as well. And then number 5, can I also bless my heart and reality with that exact positive emotion to help heal deeper layers of emotional density that others trigger as an opportunity to support my expansion and evolution? Please apply this approach each time you're triggered by the choices and behaviors of others, and always conclude with greater self-love and admiration for yourself. Be as gentle with yourself as humanly possible. Anyway, I thought that was a neat, And I'll go ahead and post the text. He had sent it in an email, so I'll post it, just as a post on our Facebook page, just so people can see it if they want to.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good way to get people out of that.
With our, stop trying to wake other people up. This is an example of how can you source it for yourself. Focus on yourself. Like we said, how do you focus on your own expansion, while still being able to, number one, you don't want to like literally live in a bubble where you can't go outside your house or interact with people, because you're like, oh, I don't want that vibration. I don't want that to rub off on me, but how do you retrain yourself and re-own your power? And maybe there are some situations where you're like, you know what, I'm retraining myself right now to stay in an expanded bubble. When I'm around you, I really contract. So I'm going to pull out for 5 minutes, or I'm going to pull out for 5 months, or, you may have, we were talking about that today. Maybe there are varying ways in which you're going to interact with people differently or have different boundaries. You may set different boundaries with people. But something like this is so beautiful because it's not trying to wake someone else up. You're not going to them and confronting them and saying, which you can, but you get my point. It's a way for you to do all the internal work over here. Whatever external work you do between you and that person is, kind of on that level, but on the internal level, on doing your internal reset, your internal retraining, for what's important to you. It's like, you're not trying to wake them up. You're trying to wake yourself up, which is the most important part, right? We're all just over here trying to wake ourselves up because that's what's going to overflow, in whatever ways that it does. But yeah, I love this process because it allows you to source it 100% with yourself, and you're not dependent. And this is what you were talking about, Kelly. You're not dependent on how that person reacts or replies to you. It's totally over here with you.
Right. It doesn't matter. And, and that goes back to a lot of emotional stuff for people, like we talked about many times. If you need to figure out where it is you need to forgive yourself, where it is that you need to fix things within yourself. Why are these people a trigger to you? Like, what are you lacking in yourself that needs to be explored further so that you are not affected by what's being tossed your direction by somebody else? I think that the stronger the contrast, the stronger your desire is to get out of that contrast, right? So, we talked about abusive families, and we talked about, I've had people ask me flat out, why was I born into this family? Like, why was I, no, seriously, like, they're abusive.
Why did I choose this?
Why would I choose such a thing? And it's like, well, you're smart to have chosen it, because it's going to send your ability of awareness and consciousness. You're going to get there so much faster. And then, and then you have the opposite side of people. They're like, well, should I have asked for an abusive family so I can get to consciousness and awareness faster? No, you shouldn't have. But the thing is that those that came into those situations in this lifetime are doing it to learn faster, to gain more awareness and more consciousness in a quicker pace than, the average individual who came into a cush family of some sort, and then had to deal with those things later on in life. Because believe it or not, you all have to deal with it on one level or another. You are going to be faced by these challenges, by these abusive behaviors, by these separations in mental thought and, polarities of politics, whatever it is. However it's going to test you, it is. And that's when, as Casey was saying, you have to rise to the occasion of being conscious of how you're feeling, how you're taking care of yourself, how you're coming out of it on your own. You don't need, really and truly, you don't need anybody else to be helping you get out of this. This is all you. This is 100% your ability to rise to your own occasion of life. And I remember Abraham Hicks had said a quote that was pretty cool, is that out of everything is born focus, right? So everything that is happening to you is going to bring in an intense amount of focus that is then going to launch you into awareness and consciousness. Like, it has no choice. Even like someone stealing your pencil, that's going to launch. I remember in high school, people used to piss me off when they took my pens and they never reappeared. You know what I mean? Like little things like that. Like, something that small launches you into, a sense of focus. Like, where am I at? Why am I so mad about that? Figure that out within you. Like, why was that a trigger for you? these things, these are trying times. These are really big, heavy topics that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Everybody I talk to is feeling so bad for somebody else. Seriously. It's like, oh, I just feel so bad, that they're having to deal with this, and feel so bad that these people are suffering here and there. It's like, okay, don't, because they are all growing and they are all expanding in their own way. Whether they're losing family members, or they're ill themselves, or they've lost their jobs, or they've lost their homes, or they've lost their desires, of their biggest desire in life has come into crumbles. I mean, there's going to be a rebuilding, and they're going to be rebuilding in a way that they never even knew was possible because of these huge, huge changes. So, I mean, that's important for everybody to know. So stop trying to wake up other people. Stop trying to be, the, I guess, the rocket of desire for everybody else to have your desires too, and just focus on your own. Focus on what you came here to expand on, the consciousness you came in to be, and don't worry about everybody else's crap, because the more you worry about it, the more buried you become in all of that, and the less likely you are to learn the entire point, learn the entire, what's the word I'm even looking for? Learn your purpose. Yeah. Learn your purpose here. So let's focus in on that and not be so sidetracked by, Michikaboo, who wants to spit on you every 5 minutes, or every time you turn on the news, you're pissed. Don't focus there. Focus here, 100%.
Right.
So, and I think that exercise was a great way for people to try to lift that off.
Oh, totally. And to lighten up, I mean, that phrase came to me again today. It's like, so perfect, right? We all just need to lighten up a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite spiritual thought leaders that I follow, her name's Jill Renee Feeler, and she had some really great posts the last couple of weeks. And one this week, and I did post it to our Facebook page. It was like, life is for living, and it sounds so basic, but we've kind of, this level of fear of death and fear of loved ones dying. And, it's gripped us to the point that we've forgotten, like, the earth has never been safe. It's never been a safe place to be. I mean, if we're trying to get everything in a nice little box and tie a nice little bow on it, it's always just going to pop right off. It's just going to go, I mean, the second you think you got that bow tied, it's just going to pop this way, pop that way. I mean, that's not what this world is. This world is messy. This world is, I mean, at any moment, any one of us could die. It's never been an inherently safe place. So clearly that's not what we're here for. We're here to move through that. And certainly, it's fine. And of course we have emotions that come up, and, we're human, and we're kind of, my phrase is all of it, we're all of it. But, at the end of the day, like you said, to refocus and to bring that focus and to remember life is for living. That's kind of the being in the present moment thing, rather than getting so contracted and focused on, the wrong thing, I guess I would say, in terms of where our focus is, expanding it out so that you can be more in just, I'm going to live life right now. And bring some of that perspective to it, because in that bigness, then other people, you can hold the space for other people's perspectives and other people's way of living without getting so constricted by, like, oh my God, that's impinging on my ability. I mean, it's just like, it's that energy, So I just loved some of her thoughts that week, and that she really just brought that to the fore, because I think it is good to remind ourselves and also go, oh yeah, that's right, but without holding on so tightly.
I mean, it's important. You can't hold on that tight, because, you will implode. And I think that, well, I don't really know what I'm thinking right now. I have so many thoughts going through my head at one time. I'm honestly because I like sidetracked because I want to talk about death, and I know we don't have time to talk about that, so I think what we'll do, because I think we're almost out of time, aren't we?
Yeah, we have a little bit more, but we're towards the end.
Yeah, and so what we're going to do is, I think you had a really good passage that you wanted to read that I think incorporates and ties all of this in.
Yeah, and brings it back to ourselves as the center.
And now that I said that I want to talk about death, like I can just hear people like in my own head, well, tell me, what do you think about death? Another time. We'll do it.
I think we'll do it next week.
Yeah, I think we discussed that. I think we will do it next time.
I think we'll dive
And
into, yeah, like free will and collective free will and just kind of some of
yeah,
those bigger questions that we ask ourselves and how does that, kind of relate to our day-to-day experience right now and how society is relating to all of this.
yeah, and I think it just dawned on me too, something I wanted to say in relation to what you had just spoke about. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be caring towards other people and what they're going through. What I am trying to say though is that I don't want people, because I've noticed it in myself many years down the road, in the past, that when I try to get into where somebody is to help them with a problem, like where I try to be empathetic, for example, then all I'm doing is energetically coming to their level. I'm like, oh, here I am. I'm with you now. Let's try to swim out of this together, which for some people works. But I think for the majority of people, it's important that you come from almost an unconditional love side, like a conscious, unconditional love, where you're almost coming from above. You're like, hey, come up here with me. Because those people that sit down with you, you're in a room of people, you're really depressed, and you talk to one person, you still feel like shit. And then you talk to someone else and you feel a little bit worse. And then suddenly you talk to somebody who's vibrating on a very conscious, beautiful level, and you suddenly feel better. It's like, oh, every time I talk to that person, I feel better. Like I feel a little more lifted up. And it's because they're coming from a higher space and a higher vibration than where everybody else is sitting or where that particular person who needed that assistance was sitting. So if you can be of any help to your loved ones or to people who are suffering from illnesses and loss and all the things we just talked about that they've lost, come from a higher point of view, a higher space, and talk to them that way instead of, oh, I know what you're feeling, and oh, isn't it just horrible? They don't need that.
Yeah.
They don't need that. They need a lifting vibration. And so be that for people.
Yeah. And what's so cool about that? So this book that one of the passages was from that I totally forgot to read, she talks about tuning forks, and it's almost like the Hartfield. If you think of, we were talking about coherence and resonance, like there's literally a resonant frequency, that's what we're talking about with the electromagnetic piece, that has almost like a tuning fork quality to it, that if you have, one tuning fork that you hit and the other one is still, eventually that one will resonate with the same vibration. And so that's what you're saying. It's literally almost like you're taking your expansive heart field that has a vibration, and it literally invites people in to then resonate at that vibration. And that's why, last week talking about claim who you are as a light worker, that's why it's powerful, because it's literally emanating outward in a very concrete way and affecting others, affecting yourself and affecting others. So I think that goes perfectly with what you're saying, and why you do want to come from that kind of vibration if you're able for yourself. You want to come from that vibration almost to be your own higher vibration for yourself when you can, and bring yourself into resonance, and then to also bring others into resonance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right.
Well, go ahead. I'm trying to think if it's useful we'll go ahead and read both of them. So the first passage was from a book called The Sovereignty of Love, which is actually a take on Ho'oponopono that Kelly mentioned last week. And she says, various spiritual traditions instruct us to transcend duality in order to experience oneness. But to fully embrace all of life, we must embrace contrast, as it is a governing principle of existence. To deny this spectrum of opposites is to deny a fully engaged life. It is not duality itself that causes us suffering. It is our inability to find emotional and mental harmony within the variety of contrasts that present themselves. In its balance and magnificence, duality provides us the opportunity to experience all the gifts of creation and choose how we relate to them. So I love that, to kind of bring focus to what we've been discussing today. And then the other post, which I did post to our Facebook page, one of my friends posted it, and it was just so beautiful in terms of sourcing that vibration within yourself. So it's from the famous writer Albert Camus. He said, "In the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. I realized through it all that in the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. And that makes me happy. For it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there's something stronger, something better, pushing right back.
Nice. Yeah,
Love that.
pretty much what we said. Love it. Well, be quiet within you, you know, and embrace yourself and expand within you, and everything else will expand beautifully around you.
And you'll notice things around you coming into resonance.
Yeah.
Play with that. Have fun with that.
Yeah, exactly.
And let's all lighten up a little bit.
Let it go a little, you know, don't hold so tight on all that.
Oh,
all right. Well, I think that's it for us tonight. Yeah.
Yep.
That was a lot. Hopefully everybody can absorb that. You might have to listen to that a few times to catch all the little.
I know. I'll be listening to it a few times.
I know. I told Casey, like, I only listened to these once and I need to listen to them more often so I know what the heck I already had said and how to feed into that, as opposed to just coming fresh, not remembering anything. So I will do that. I'll do my own homework. All right. Well, yeah. So we'll see you guys next week. And as always, let us know if there's anything that you would like us to address or anything that you would like to contribute. We're always welcome for ideas and anything you're kind of going through that week that you'd like maybe to talk about with us on even a private, way. So, all right. We love all of you. Take care and have a good night and have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you next week.
Yes. Grow your bubble. Love you.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Bye.